Welcome to the Whole Church Podcast.
Your favorite church unity podcast.
Probably.
If you want to hear from pastors,
Professors.
and everything in between,
Right, sure.
and, the occasional train talk.
Right, yeah. Have we got the podcast for you?
All right, everybody. Welcome again to the Whole Church Podcast. I am your co-host, Joshua Knoll. And today I'm thankful for Gabby the Sea Turtle at Ripley's Aquarium in Myrtle Beach. And here's your other co-host, TJ, which stands for The Josh. Yeah. The Josh, what are you thankful for?
I'm thankful that I didn't break my toe the other day.
Thankful for that, too.
Yeah, because it almost happened.
How?
Yeah, I kicked. It's a long story.
Awesome. And today's guest, so everybody knows, we have Justin Vaughn, who is a good friend of me and TJ's. He's worked camp. He's actually technically been on the podcast before in our Hats Off to Camp episode that we did, this bonus episode last year.
Mm-hmm. He's also technically usually our boss when we work together.
Yeah. Yeah. Today he's our guest, which is weird. Usually I guess we're his guest. But yeah, no, he's also at camp. He is a parent, a foster parent, a teacher, and the world's greatest camp director, as DJ already mentioned.
Well, I think he's the best cabin leader, probably.
You guys are kind.
That I've ever had.
Although I do remember that one time he terribly lost a dance-off with another cabin. But,
no, it wasn't even close.
Man, back my first year as a cabin leader, I think it was one of Justin's last years, just so our audience is aware, we did a big dance-off between the cabins. And, I don't think anybody won. It was just something fun for the kids.
That's right.
In my head, I won.
I promise no one won.
Oh, man. Which TJ might have been a camper during that. Although I don't know. Were you still a camper then?
I wasn't dancing, so.
Oh, okay. So probably not. Because you probably would have been in one of our cabins if you were there.
True.
Yeah. All right. So as part of our new intro, I've developed a mini segment called the greeting card segment. I have 10 note cards here. I'm going to shuffle through. And when Justin tells me when, I will stop. And whatever is on this card, Justin is going to tell us that about himself. For example, one of them is, what's the least interesting thing about yourself? One is an embarrassing story. There's a couple others in here. And we'll probably do just a few guests until we use them all. So today, Justin, you tell me when to stop shuffling. And I'll tell you what this says.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Yeah.
Your least favorite chore?
Least favorite chore. All right, this one's easy for me. I don't know why this bothers me so much, but I despise ironing. It's the worst. I feel like it's a lot of work for not a lot of result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I understand that.
I stick with the wrinkle spray now. It's like a miracle worker. You just spray it all down, hang it up, and you're good to go.
Especially because modern clothes are tapered in different ways, and that causes them to not line up right on the board.
Yep.
No, I really don't like cleaning the bathroom.
Yeah, that one's...
specifically the bathtub. Because I always feel like I'm going to injure myself.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. And DJ, you're to tell us about what we need. I'd like to know what we need.
All right. As far as needs for the podcast go, we need you guys to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at the Whole Church Podcast. Our new social media coordinator should be working on those, so they're not bad now.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah. What else?
We are still looking for a new theme music if someone would like to take a crack at one. Just a thought. And if someone would be willing to edit for us, if we need an editor.
Yeah, I've tried to reach out earlier this week to some people, but we are still looking for someone to help us edit the audio and improve that. That would, I think that's probably our biggest need right now, really, other than shares and support on Patreon, which I think you mentioned that, right?
Mm-hmm. And please consider supporting us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You get access to all of our extra content, and we are eternally grateful. And that's worth so much,
our eternal gratitude is invaluable.
All right, and for our silly question today, I've come up with one. If you had to wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden the world was in a certain animated style, what would you choose? And I'll go first as an example. I would choose Treasure Planet style because it's gorgeous.
All right, I'll go next. My anime style, since you use Treasure Planet, am I to assume that any animation counts? So it doesn't have to be like Japanese anime.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Okay, perfect. In that case, I'm gonna go with I'm gonna call it the Fox and the Hound style, but that general like 70, 80 old Disney where it's just all very simple. I like that. I think it's beautiful how simple it is to me.
Good. I think I would go with probably a more modern Finding Nemo style.
Oh.
Everything was just super bright, super crisp. So yeah, if I could choose one, I think that would be it.
That sounds pleasant. All right, cool. Easy, fast, silly question.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So with that, just so everybody knows some about what we're talking about, Justin's book is called Room at the Table, which isn't just about the foster kid. You have to read it and figure out what all it is about. But it's a great title, I think. I really appreciate it. It's on Kindle. You have paperback. It's on Amazon and pretty much anywhere they want to find a book, right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's available in paperback on Amazon and digitally just about anywhere. Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Apple Books. It's just about anywhere.
Awesome. And it's a story about a kid who was a foster kid who got taken in by the Watsons, and the story's kind of written for upper elementary, but I think it's helpful for all ages. I stormed through it in just a couple of days. It's like 100 pages. Awesome read, very informal. Gave me a lot of questions I didn't even know that I had about foster care that we're going to get to ask Justin about.
Awesome.
But before we get to what I have dubbed the real interesting stuff, the book and everything, we want to get to all the questions people might already have about foster care and kind of just hammer that out real quick. So the best way I could think to do that is with our patent speed round. No one else has ever copyrighted the speed round, so that's going to be ours. Sure, no one's ever thought of the term before, so. Our speed round for the rules is I'm not allowed to ask any follow-up questions. That's the rule that gets broken the most. And you are going to be able to answer these questions we have here in one sentence, or just say pass if you don't think you can do it.
Okay.
Awesome. And we'll start that. TJ, you want to count me down?
3,
Okay.
2, 1, 0, go.
All right, Justin, what are the requirements for being a foster parent?
To become a foster parent, you have to commit trainings, a home visit, and a home inspection by the fire department.
Awesome. Next is, do you need to make a lot of money to be a foster parent?
You do not need to make a lot of money to become a foster parent.
Perfect. Do foster parents have to work from home?
There are a lot of foster parents that work outside of the home.
Can single people become foster parents?
I was actually a single person when I became a foster parent.
Oh, I know that. But I don't have any follow-up questions. What expensive. Do you get to choose the age and sex of any of the children that you care for when you're a foster parent? Do you get to pick and choose who you want?
You get to set parameters for ages and genders.
Awesome, interesting. And then last one. Once licensed, how long will it take to have a kid placed in your home?
It varies for everyone, but I received my first placement in about 3 days after I received my license.
Wow, that was amazing. I think the only sentence that where he even used a contraction was the last one.
You skipped E.
Did I? Oh, I did. I skipped one. Justin, can you meet the children before they come to your house?
You don't meet the children before they come to your house.
Awesome. Now we got them all. That was phenomenal. I think that might be the best a participant has done for speed round thus far.
Thanks. It was that teacher mode.
Thank you.
All right. So now that we've covered all the speedy stuff that we're not allowed to ask follow-up questions on, do you think the whole church should be involved with the foster care system? And not specifically us, just the church.
The church in general.
Yeah, not the whole church is in our podcast, but is in the whole church.
Definitely. I think that the church should actually be at the front lines of foster care. In our house, our go-to verse, and the reason that we even became foster parents, was James 1:27, and it's talking about how pure and genuine religion in the eyes of God is to take care of orphans and widows in their distress or their times of trouble. So I do believe that that's the church's place. Like, we should be at the front lines of taking care of these kids.
Great.
All right. So do you think like all foster systems should be at least a little religious?
No, I think that anyone that has the benefit of children in their minds should be foster parents. Like, anyone that has the resources available and has the desire to help children. Obviously, if the church stepped up to the point that that there was not the great need that there is, then that would be a different discussion. But the truth is, right now, there are countless children and not enough homes. So I think that anyone that has a desire to help children should consider it.
All right.
The whole church and more.
That's right.
Whole church plus a lot.
Yeah.
So you've written a book. That's
right.
why we're here today.
Yeah.
What inspired you to write Room at the Table?
It was me. I'm the main character, actually.
So I was inspired to write the book because of my journey as a foster parent, but also because of my experience as a teacher. For those of you that don't know, I teach early childhood. So I taught first grade for 7 years, and I taught second grade for 2 years. And in that time, I met children that were either in care or were experiencing coming out of care. So really, my inspiration for the book came from those two things merging, being a foster parent and being an educator. And I really wanted to create a story that would be easy for children to understand, but I wanted it to be for all children. So I wanted to write a story that would be helpful to children that are in foster care and give them a voice and give them hope, but also children that don't even know what foster care is or have never heard of it. In my time teaching, I've had so many children that have just never heard of it. They've never experienced it, and they don't know what it is. So it always leads to great conversations with them about how we can care for others in their time of need and how sometimes families need help, and that's okay.
That was actually a really interesting part of the book, was one of the teachers got to interact with that, where some kid didn't understand foster kids and was talking to the main character, and then it turns out that the teacher was involved in the foster system. I won't say how. We don't want to give any spoilers. Yeah. That was really unique, and probably the moment that stood out the most to me in the book. I was like, wow, all right, I didn't see that coming.
Awesome.
But so we're here to talk about the book. We're here to talk about Room at the Table. One of the other things that really stood out to me was Mr. Sanders' house. Early on in the book, you described the house, and I don't think I ruined anything for anybody. So it was the house, right? Christmas time, the house that did the big presentation, and everybody went there. That was really cool to me, because I think that was the point when the book felt really real to me. Because at our neighborhood, I don't even remember their name, but I knew there was the house that you went to for Halloween. That was the house that had the big decorations and gave full-size candy bars.
Yeah.
And that's what that reminded me of, where I was like, oh, wow, that brought me straight back to my childhood.
That's awesome.
Just for background, even though I don't know their name, I also know that my wife and a few other people would actually come to our neighborhood from other neighborhoods to go to that house, because it was such a big deal.
Yeah, it seems like there's always that community house that is either, one of the big holidays, Halloween or Christmas, or even New Year's with fireworks, there's always the house that's the community house.
Yeah, and I think that's what brought me into the community for the book. That was an excellent touch that I just couldn't not bring up. Or I was like, wow, you know what? Hats off to all the Mr. Sanders out there, all the people who you're that house. Thank you.
That's right. Yeah.
So, Room at the Table could have just as easily been about the Millers' story, and had Joshua move from the Watson house into theirs. What made you decide to take the this more uplifting kind of route with the book?
So, just for a little background, for those who may not have read the book yet, the Millers are a foster family that the main character Joshua lived with prior to what happens in this book. So the reason that I chose the route that I did and the more uplifting story is because there are a lot of different kinds of foster homes. And in this story, I wanted to take the uplifting route again because I wanted to give a voice of hope to kids that are in care. If there's a child in foster care reading this story, I want them to know that there can be very positive outcomes from what they're going through. And unfortunately, there are instances where children are moved to different locations due to a foster parent request or due to a state request. And unfortunately, sometimes it's just due to convenience for the person making the request and not always thinking of the children first. So that is actually one of the current goals for South Carolina. We're currently working as a state to try to lessen the amount of moves that children are making in care, because oftentimes a child will come into care and move from one home to another, which of course creates instability, makes it a more traumatic experience than it already is being removed from your mind. So it's just the uplifting route because I wanted to show that there is hope and there is a positive outcome, and that there are a lot of people out here ready to make that happen for them.
So, Justin, yeah, I got to be honest. Part of why I wanted to ask about the Millers was because when I read it, it was kind of a smaller part of the book. But I was like, huh, weird. I had a lot of questions about what's going on with the Millers. I want to know what more you can tell us about them. Like, what was going on in your head with them? Is that so? What part of what happened? If I may ruin this for people.
Go ahead.
The Miller family, he described having a room that was shared with basically a ton of other kids, and it sounds like they just kind of took on too much. Am I getting the right vibe from that?
Yeah. So the Millers in this story kind of represent the family that gets into foster care and doesn't necessarily have the right intentions or maybe even the right expectations of what foster care would be. Sometimes we do end up with families that do take in many children and don't necessarily give them the best care. They give them a place to sleep, and that's about the extent of it. It's not about welcoming the children in as a part of the family. So unfortunately, just like anywhere else, any profession or anything, you have kind of the I guess what you would call the bad apples of the bunch. So the Millers kind of represent in this the people who maybe have become foster parents or have chosen to foster, but they don't necessarily have the best intentions for the children when they choose that.
So I have to ask, why does that even happen? Is there like any kind of financial gain or anything that they can get from getting into foster care? Like, why would you do it if you weren't able to do the most?
There is a reimbursement as a foster parent. So when you choose to foster, it's a very low amount. I want to say it's about $12 a day. And so if you were to get into it with the wrong intentions and take in multiple children, sometimes 5 or 6 children at a time, unfortunately, if you're someone who is already staying at home and you're looking for a way to make some money, that unfortunately would be a route that sometimes people have chosen. And again, if that money is used for the children, it's not very much. But if you're not using it to really care for the children, it can become quite substantial at that point.
That's sad.
It is, yeah. And again, it's just they're the few and far between. For every one like that, you have so many other amazing foster parents that are really in this for the right reasons and are really changing kids' lives.
Like our good friend Justin Vaughn.
Yeah, like Justin. Yeah, when you wrote this, did you think of yourself as the dad? Was that like, did you base the character off of yourself or anything?
There were aspects of it that I did. Since I was drawing from my experiences, there were some instances where the way that he would respond to things, or the way that I would respond to something, or maybe even the concerns that he would have would be the same concerns that I've had as a foster parent. So it definitely made it easier to me to kind of think of myself through that lens and how I would react to something with one of my foster kids. So where he wasn't necessarily based on me, he still had a lot of characteristics that that definitely ring true for me.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to be careful how I say this. So I know there's one point in the book where he gets really mad at how some people react to stuff externally from his family.
Yeah,
and he kind of acts on that, and I was like, oh man, because up until that, I think I was just picturing Justin Vaughn as the dad, and I was like, oh, angry Justin. That makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, that's actually me too. In that particular, and I won't really get into details of it, but in that particular point in the story, he's really just feeling the need to defend and protect his family, and he goes, in my opinion, he goes about it in a very respectful way, but also in a way that makes it known to those individuals that what he believes about it.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely stood there with him. I guess maybe I'm a little bit angrier than you, because I was just like, I'd be okay if he hit him right now. I'm like, let's just turn this into an action book.
Yes, one-on-one Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, that's what the second half of the book is.
A duel.
Oh, man.
So let's talk about the other family, the Watsons.
Yes.
The better one.
How common is the kind of relationship that the Watsons and Joshua's mother had in real life?
Joshua the character, not me.
So that's a really good question. Again, every fostering situation is different. Every child that we have welcomed into our house has a different story, and the way that we're able to connect with their families has been different. But speaking from our personal experience, it is definitely doable. We are still in contact with several of our foster children's biological families. One of the goals in foster care is, if there is a safe way to build a relationship with a biological family, then you are not only at that point a resource to the child, but you are a resource to the family as a whole. And there are instances where it would not be a safe situation to do that. If there's a history of physical violence or anything like that, you may not be able to bridge a relationship with the biological family. But if you're talking about instances where there may have been neglect or a lack of education on how to parent, those are some instances where you can really build a strong relationship with the biological family. And at that point, again, you become a resource to the whole family, which is really a very special thing. And that's something that's important to Abby and I as we foster, is if there's a way to connect with the family, we try our best to do that, because when it comes down to it, we want them to know that we are in this for their kids, and part of being in this for their kids is to also be in this for them. So while every situation is very different, there are definitely times where you can build a relationship with a biological family. So I guess I would say that that's an ideal situation, but it's a very possible situation.
Yeah, the reason I have TJ ask a lot of the questions is I do all the follow-up questions that probably are too much. But so, I didn't know until I read this that was even a thing. Like, that sometimes kids were just in the foster system until their parents, got better, essentially, and then they went back to their parents. And I was like, well, I literally had no idea that the biological parents were even involved. Like, I was like, what?
Yeah.
That's part of how this works? I
Yeah.
just never considered it.
That's a new, I don't want to call it new, but it is a bigger push now. At least, and again, I speak from the experience of someone who fosters in South Carolina, so I can't speak for everywhere. But in our state right now, in the trainings, they're really trying to push the concept of, instead of just being called a foster parent or a foster family, being called a resource family. And again, that's to add on the context that you are really able to be in this for the family unit as a whole, and not necessarily just for the child if it's a safe opportunity to do that. We've had, and again, with no names or anything, but we've had children in the past where they were taken into care, and everything that happened, they needed to be taken into care, but their parents also lacked maybe some of the resources and some of the information that would have helped them to be able to handle parenting better. And we've been able to keep in touch with some of those kids, and it really makes a difference to know, for those people to know that there's someone out there that's still wanting the best for their kids. And so I think that that's such a huge part of it is, as a foster parent, if you're able to build a relationship with a biological family, it really is a huge thing for the kids, and it's a huge thing for the families. And I don't want to sound so idealistic. I mean, there are times as well where we've tried to build relationships with a biological family, and basically we've been told, that we need to know our place and we're not a part of the family. And so it happens, and sometimes that is the reaction. But from what we've found, as long as it's a safe situation, there's not much you can lose by trying to be a resource to the whole family versus just for the child.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Real quick, if you guys will let me, Justin, you said several of your kids. How many foster kids do you have?
So we have kind of a unique situation. So a lot of times children will be in and out of foster care very quickly. So there are some foster parents, for example, that will take what we call emergency placements. And so, like if a child goes into care in the middle of the night and they need to go into care, those families are able to take them in, sometimes for a very short period of time, sometimes for a longer. The children that we've taken in have actually stayed with us for pretty large amounts of time. So at this point, we have had 5 foster children, and some of them with us for the period of a year, some of them with us for a shorter amount of time, 3 to 4 months, for example. But it has varied greatly too. So we've had a smaller number, but they stay with us for a very long time. And the ages have all been very different too. So we've had anywhere from an 11-month-old baby up to a 10-year-old boy. So it has been quite the range.
All right. And currently, do you have foster children in your care?
We do not have a placement right now. Our last placement went home at the end of the fall semester, so the end of 2019. We have not taken on a new placement yet.
All right. So in the book, Joshua's teachers and foster parents all had to learn to be a lot more intentional in how they handled most parts of their life. Is that typical? Is that a typical impact that a foster child has on their surroundings?
I think so, for sure. And I think that's something that foster care teaches those that are involved, whether you're the foster parent or whether you're in the same church or same community or you're the teacher. You have to learn to be very intentional with the time that you have. And that could be said for anyone. But as a foster parent, you really don't know which day they're no longer going to be with you. And so you kind of have to take every day at face value and take every day as this might be my last full day with you. And what do I want to impart with you, or what do I want to make sure that you know before you're no longer with me? So I think that in that way, it's very much an impact that the foster kids have on the people around them. It requires the people around them to become much more intentional with what they say and what they do with the time that they're given. And I think it also, one of the things that that I always think about is kids that are in foster care. Unfortunately, a lot of times they can kind of fly under the radar, whether it be in school or in their community or in their church. And part of that is because of, privacy concerns. And so everything is locked down so tightly so that people don't know, where they are or that they're in a foster home, which is absolutely necessary and absolutely needed. But at the same time, that creates this mystery of the unknown. I think that that's a huge part of why people don't fully understand foster care, because it is very secretive once a child goes into care. So again, that's needed, it's necessary, but at the same time, it also creates this mystery that surrounds it. So I think that will also affect the way that people handle the things that they say or do when they're around foster children.
All right. So it's not a terribly long book, and I personally actually have not finished it yet, because I'm dumb. But what other alternate endings or beginnings did you consider when you were writing Room at the Table?
So when I began Room at the Table, I really actually battled with how I wanted to end it, because every foster care story ends differently. So there were times when I was writing the story, because again, the whole time I wanted it to really appeal to kids that were facing this, that were facing that kind of situation. And so since those stories can end so differently, I didn't want to end it in a way that would give a false sense of hope or give a perspective maybe that won't hold true for the kid that's reading the story or hearing the story. We know that I don't know if you guys know, in just the United States, there are over 400,000 kids in foster care. And that is just based off of our last census data. So it's not current to this day, but as of our last census data, there are over 400,000 kids in foster care. And again, with that many scenarios, you're going to have them play out very, very differently. Sometimes kids are going to be adopted into a forever family. Sometimes that goes exactly ideal and it works well. And sometimes, you hear stories in the news about how it might not have worked the way that it planned. And the same goes for going back to the biological family. Sometimes the children will go back to the biological family. The family has gotten the help that they need and everything is great. Sometimes they go back to the biological family and it doesn't go well, or they return to care. So when I was trying to decide on the ending of the story, it really made it difficult for me, because I was thinking about all of these alternate ideas and what could happen to a child in Joshua's situation. And so my ultimate decision came down to what is the best way that I can give a message of hope, but also let the reader or the child know that whichever scenario they end up in, there are people out there that are ready to support them and ready to make sure that they're okay, whether they go back to their biological family or whether they're adopted into a new family. Are people that are very intentional about making sure that their next steps and their next phases in their life are going to be okay.
All right. So at no point did you consider turning the book into a Goosebumps Choose Your Own Adventure book, and then writing 12 endings?
I did not.
Oh, okay.
But and again, without giving anything away, I feel like I tried to end the book in a way that that still leaves a little bit to be questioned or a little bit to be interpreted for the different avenues that a child in foster care can find themselves in. So whereas in this story does have a very specific ending, it also introduces some questions about how does the story always work the same way.
It was interesting to me, because I was trying to figure out how I would describe the ending, because I talked to my mom about it, and I was like, it's sort of like a cliffhanger, but it's also sort of like it's gone full circle and it feels very complete, and I just don't know how to describe it. It was really, really well done.
Thank you.
So, in the message from the author section of Room at the Table, you suggested some practical ways that people could get involved with the foster care system. You can contact your local children's agency to become a licensed foster parent yourself, or you can donate toys or clothes to your local children's agency, or reaching out to a foster family to prepare them a homemade meal, because it takes a village to raise a child. What would be the ramifications of the church uniting to help in these ways?
Well, like I was saying earlier when we first started, I do think that the church really should be at the front lines of making sure that these children are cared for and taken care of. They're in vulnerable situations, and the church as a whole, we have a call to take care of orphans. And I think that if the church really united to care for these kids, whether that be, I'm not saying everyone should be a foster parent. What I am saying is if we really united for these kids and we either fostered or we supported those who are fostering, I think that we could see a lot of families really brought to the light of Christ through that. Because at that point, like when I was talking earlier about being a resource to the whole family, many of these biological families have never experienced that kind of unconditional love from someone else. And if a child is in care and the church is able to step in and to care for that child, but to also care for that family, I think that that's when we show them as people and as parents that we love them too, and that it just makes me think about what could be accomplished for the kingdom if we really stepped in to support these kids that are in vulnerable situations, and in turn we were able to win their families.
Okay, so if I may be just slightly more specific, because I just curious what you would have to say about this. Let's say, mostly people who listen to this podcast are South and North Carolina, some scattered out throughout other places, but mostly South and North Carolina, part of our church got a prophecy. Let's say everybody listening right now went out and either donated toys and clothes to the child agency, or became a foster parent, got licensed, or went out and bought a meal for someone who's in foster care. Everybody buy Justin Vaughn a steak meal for him and his family, please. If everybody did one of those three things, like everyone listened, what do you think they would see change around them, or in themselves, maybe even?
Well, first of all, for themselves, I think that they would really. Sometimes it's easy to not see the need if you're not looking, and I think for themselves, if they really were intentional about getting out to see how they could help children in foster care, they would realize that it is a very, very large task that unfortunately right now is only being taken on by a very small amount of people. And I think if they were able to step out and to see that they would find themselves wanting to do more. I think naturally they would find themselves wanting to help those kids and those families more. And I'm sorry, what was the other part of your question?
What about directly around them? Would they see things change for those families or for their community if they started to do this?
I believe so. I think that once those biological families start to see the resource that is available to them through people and through the church, I think that you would start seeing those people in your churches. I think that you would start finding ways through your church to have an outreach for those families. I think it, I just think it could be a big thing for everyone.
Awesome. Well, that's all we have for the book part. We have some other things we do for the Indian of the podcast. We don't do this every week, but some weeks, when allowed, and TJ doesn't, despise me for it, I get to talk about trains.
All right.
So this is our train talk segment. It's just going to be a minute. Yeah. And today, I just want to inform everybody that recently the UK has, in fact, granted 400,000 euros towards the Hydroflex project. For those who don't know, the Hydroflex is the name of the hydrogen powered train engine in the UK. A lot of European nations have been kind of moving this way. What's interesting about it is the UK also only has 169 registered hydrogen cars. So it's crazy that they are investing more into the train system than they are vehicles, to me anyway, as an American. But
Well, implementing something like that into a car is diminishing returns.
wait, oh,
Because the first electric car came out so long ago.
yeah,
But they're only now coming into fruition, really.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But they do say, since it's going so well in other European countries, if it also goes well in the UK, we should expect to see hydrogen ran trains here in the US as well, which I would be very excited to see a completely new type of engine train for me to ride and look at and gawk at and talk on here about and annoy TJ with. It would be fantastic.
So the only time I've ever been on a train was in high school. We went to, it was actually technically my senior trip, but I took it the summer before my senior year because that was the only time they were going. They only went every 2 years.
Yeah.
And we rode a train from England to all the way through to Germany.
Nice.
So we went through the underground channel there and went from England to France, and then we went to Switzerland and ended up in Germany at the very end. We were only there for a day, and then we flew back home.
That sounds incredible.
It was pretty awesome.
That sounds awesome. Did you happen to check out station 9 3/4?
I did not.
Oh man, awesome.
I regret it now, though.
Oh man, that sounds great. I want to go to Europe and ride hydrogen trains everywhere. I think it would be fantastic.
The first fully electric car came out in 1890. So
90, really?
It's been a long time.
Apparently.
Wow.
But I don't think that'll be quite the same as hydrogen powered cars, but anyway.
All right, well, that was train talk, everybody. Thank you for letting me talk about trains. Now, what we do actually do I was trying to avoid saying do. What we actually do every episode is just we like to talk about anything God's done for us recently, whether it be a challenge, a blessing, something encouraging, or just something that just kind of happens to be somewhat spiritual in nature that's been going on. I'll go ahead and start. My God moment. I mean, I have so many. I have a really weird one. So pretty much every day, or a lot of days, I'll go to the gas station and I'll buy a Monster at the gas station, and it's $3.10 for anyone who's wondering who just wants to get a Monster in downtown Charlotte. It's not worth it.
But I swear, every time I buy him one, it's at least $4.50.
Yeah, it costs more if you're TJ. But I forgot my dime once, and the guy stopped me. And I was in there later that week, and I went to the same gas station, and I was like, oh, wait, I have 2 dimes today. And I gave it back to him. It was so crazy just to see his expression of, man, you remembered. And, we got to have a whole conversation, and it was just something so little that I could tell actually impacted his day, and it just reminds me, hey, sometimes doing God's work is just remembering that extra dime. It's crazy.
That's cool.
All right. I'll go next, if no one objects.
Nope, go for it.
No, please do.
All right. So, my father, Pater Familias, head of the household, for those who are unfamiliar with what the word father means, for a long time has struggled with what he thought was a form of gastritis that was destroying the lining of his stomach. Which is terrible. And it means you can't eat particulate foods like ground beef, corn, other stuff similar. But he finally agreed to go to a doctor, which for anyone else with a mid-50s Southern father, that's crazy. But it wasn't what he thought it was, that he was extremely convinced it was. It was a bug that was causing stomach ulcers.
Oh,
Interesting.
So, but that's much more treatable than atrophic gastritis. So he's been taking extremely strong antibiotics to kill that bug, and he is starting to feel better now. I think it's been like a year since he started, maybe.
awesome. Great God.
That's pretty great.
That's great, God moment. Justin, has God done anything with you recently that you'd like to share?
So, well, I guess I have two. I'll share two small things. So the first one is just I have been, while the world is chaotic all around us right now, I have been really thankful just for the time I've been able to spend with my family, and being able to really be very intentional with the time I've been able to spend with my wife and my daughter. She's growing very, very quickly, so being able to be home the last couple of months and really focus on her has been awesome. So that's my first one. And then the other one is, I guess, something I've been learning. My wife and I have been going through a devotional to learn the different names for God, because we wanted to be able to use the more personal names when we're praying, and to be able to speak in a more personal way. So that's been a really, really cool thing that we've been going through. Each devotional is very short, but it just kind of discusses a name that he's been called in the Old Testament or the New Testament, and then gives you the context for why he was called what he was called. So that's been really cool, just to be able to start learning some new ones of those, and then just being able to then use those in my prayer time. And it just feels so much more personal. It's kind of like, if you're talking to your dad and you call him, whatever you call your dad, daddy, whatever it is, it just makes it so much more personal. So learning these names, I think, has been really special in that aspect.
That's awesome.
We might have to
Two really cool God moments.
We might have to hear about. You might have to tell us what the name of that devotional is later. But
yeah.
Also,
do that.
Y'all have a beautiful daughter and beautiful family.
Thank you.
She's probably going to be. Yeah, she's probably going to be taller than me in like a week.
She's growing so fast, it's crazy.
Oh, I thought TJ was just shrinking. Crazy.
Both are happening.
Oh.
But thank you, Justin.
Yeah.
You've been great. We have one more small thing for you.
Okay.
After the outro. If you're listening to this, congratulations, you made it to the podcast. The end of the podcast.
No, you made it. This is the beginning.
You made it to the end of the intro. But thanks for listening. Please consider supporting us on Patreon at Whole Church Podcast. If you have anything you would like to tell us, you can contact us on our social medias. We have a Facebook, an Instagram, and a Twitter at The Whole Church Podcast. You can almost email us at thewholechurch@gmail.com.
Yeah, not The Whole Church Podcast, just The Whole Church. For the email.
And what are some future guests we might have, Joshua?
Well, next week, or not next week, 2 weeks from now, our 50th episode is the next episode. We're going to have Father Jonathan will be back, Sister Rose is going to be back, Dr. Leek, Dr. Beck's going to be back, Brother Tim Coulter, the Hawkins family. We have a lot of guests just next episode. Celebrate our 50th episode. We're really excited about that.
That's awesome, guys.
Oh yeah, it was cool. We've already recorded it. It was great.
You should check it out.
Great. Yeah. Also, Father Jonathan's going to be on again with us to talk about Genesis 1 through 3. We're also going to be talking to Father Christian Cisco, who does a Spanish-speaking service for the Greek Orthodox Church in Charlotte. So that's a very unique situation. We're really excited to talk to him about why they're doing that. Pastor Gary's going to be on again soon, as well as my godfather, Brother J.R. Martin. So plenty of stuff lined up for you guys. But one that I think some of our audience is probably the most excited for is the end of season 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which, of course, will be Francis Chan.
Who just doesn't know it.
We have to tell him.
Yeah.
And he has to agree.
Yeah, we don't even know his name. Alright, guys, well, keep listening if you want to hear the 10-second segment where Justin's about to describe or summarize that full podcast in 10 seconds or less. You'll only know if it was less if you click on over to Patreon.